Kick ass.
Nice work, LaRusso. Way to assert your dominance.
Where the hell were you?
No be there.
Got him. Welcome to No Mercy, a Cobra Kai kickback. My name is Jacob Burrows, and I represent Miyagi-Do, because even though I present a veneer of balance, I'm dying to run across hot coals, and I'm 1 second away from a brawl at any moment.
My name is Jim Scampoli. I represent Cobra Kai so hard that you can call me Dr. Scribblebottoms.
Very good. And this week we're talking about Season 4, Episode 2 of Cobra Kai, First Learn Stand, directed by John Hurwitz and Hayden Schlossberg, and written by Joe Pierulli and Lewin Thomas.
Yes.
Yes. Who are familiar names in the Cobra Kai universe, at least, who have been sort of on the story crew going back to Season 1. And this episode, we're gonna break it down, but I think there's a few threads happening. It's honestly like by the end of episode 2, I was so pumped for the show again. Like usually it's like episode 1, episode 2 is by the end of episode 2 is when I'm like, fuck yeah, Cobra Kai. I'm been absorbed back into the world of karate, and with the training of different styles for Johnny and Daniel, this has some of my favorite stuff from this whole season.
Oh, yeah, I agree. Before we get too far into it, because I just remembered, we did get an email that I wanted to read. I should have read it during the first episode, but we got an email from Misty. Question about Cobra Kai. Hi, I love your recaps of Cobra Kai and like to ask if recaps for Season 4 will be coming soon on your podcast. Guess what? Here we are.
Yes.
Also like to mention that both Johnny Lawrence and Daniel LaRusso are part of Generation X. Now, I vaguely remember, I think we might have had a discussion on the generations they're mentioning. The generations they belong in. Generation X are people born from 1965 to 1980. And Johnny and Daniel are born in 1967, making them part of Gen X. Kreese and Terry Silver are the boomers. Please bring that up on your podcast. So here I am bringing it up. Thanks.
Okay.
Now, what if we were discussing it and we had it wrong, what I would maybe say is kind of we touched upon their real ages in the last discussion of episode 1, is that Ralph Macchio himself, not Daniel LaRusso, but Ralph Macchio is technically a boomer. So, okay, boomer, Ralph Macchio, because he was born in 1961. And although I guess William Zabka was born in 65, so he's like right on the cusp.
Yeah.
And also, Terry Silver. Well, the actor who plays Terry Silver is also a boomer in real life, so that works. So he fits in both. Daniel is just Ralph Macchio is a boomer pretending to be Gen X, which are the worst kind of boomers, in my opinion.
I've always said that. Yeah.
But yeah, I did want to just bring that up because we got an email. Appreciate the email. You can email us at showswhatyouknow@gmail.com. And yes, we will be discussing all of Season 4, as you know. But yes, here we are in episode 2. Now, in my opinion, at least on my watch, because I don't think I talked about this in our episode 1 discussion, but I talked about it in my quick react, is I did the thing where I waited till midnight. Luckily, on Pacific time. If you're on the East Coast, you're trying to binge it at 3 a.m. But I waited till midnight for Netflix to drop all the episodes, and I just strapped in for a night of Cobra Kai. So my take, though, was that when this episode started introducing new characters, it pumped the brakes a bit for me. And I was like, uh-oh. Except for the parts where we get to see, I mean, I was excited from the trailer to see Johnny, doing a little sand the floor, paint the house. And then we get to see that here in this episode, which was great. But the stuff with Daniel's son, Anthony, and Kenny, I'm like, okay. I mean, I didn't and I don't hate it. But at the time, it was just kind of like, all right, what's going on here? Okay, all right. I mean, I see the angle now that Daniel's son is a bully, but we also gets to have those moments like Hawk did, or Reek from Game of Thrones, where you
Yeah,
get to
the
have
look to the
those.
camera moment.
Yes, where it's like the camera does a slow. It's almost like a soap opera zoom in when a scene ends, and they're kind of like, "I'm doing the thing, but should I be doing this? I don't know. I'm having second thoughts."
Yeah.
Uh, so it's
That's
just weird.
basically if you want someone to be a bad guy, but you want him to be three-dimensional, you have him do the look at the end of they do
Yeah,
something terrible, and then they're like, "What have I done?" But I'm gonna keep doing it though.
yeah. You need to show that they're kind of like, I know what I'm doing is wrong, or even a variation on it is when two characters hug, and then you zoom in on one of the persons doing the hug, and they're like, I don't know about this hug. I'm a bad person. But yes, so yeah, season 2, because we open right off with introducing Kenny. We view him through Dungeon Lord Legacies, and I mean, don't get me wrong, the actor, the actor and the character are charming. Uh, like he's kind of a likable kid immediately, so I understand why they would cast him. I kind of get where they're going. It's just tough. Like in my mind, I'm like, is this, Degrassi the Next Generation, Cobra Kai? Like, are they setting up Cobra Kai Next Generation? Which maybe they are. I'm struggling to see like an end game initially, and I shouldn't do that. I should just be watching the show. But those are like my initial thoughts when this starts happening, and we see that he's like in middle school with Daniel's son. And to their credit, they're trying to develop Daniel's son as a real character instead of just a goof. Except the only problem is he's been a goof for 3 seasons. So, and he looks completely different now, which they do comment on.
Yeah. So I think I watched some of this with my girlfriend who I was saying to her something about Robbie, like she had no interest in this. I was telling her something about Robbie and how he's, really become really interesting and he's taking the teachings from different dojos and like becoming his own person. And my girlfriend was like, well, yeah, I mean, he is 30, so that makes sense. Now the actor's not 30. I know we're getting into specifics, but like Robbie is looking like a man. Miguel is kind of looking like a man.
I think
And
Miguel looks way older than he did, but
yeah, for sure. I just mean like from that perspective, you can get, even if they're not gonna, ever take over, you can get why they would have younger people coming into the cast. Because if it becomes a show about people in their 60s teaching karate to people in their 20s, you're like, can still be good, but it's not really where we started out with this show and sort of the molding of people as they're younger. But honestly, I had none of those. I had none of those fears when I watched this, but I do think you're right in that it does take away a little bit through the season, like time and space, and I do think it pumps the brakes maybe a bit. But I don't know, for whatever reason, probably just the likability factor that you mentioned. I was just on board with this from the get go. I'm like, yeah, it feels like, to me, it felt like expanding the world a bit, and because there's this thing that happens in a lot of shows where you're like, is this just 8 people, like humans? Like, and what does this look like from the inside? And now we've gotten far enough that seeing someone who has no idea what's going on get into it again, like a lot of the other side characters are very incidental and very surface level, so I didn't have any problems with it. But yeah, I don't know. I can totally see where you're coming from.
Yeah, because I have a few responses to that. First of all,
Okay.
your girlfriend's response is very smarmy. Like, yeah, it's a show. We know he's old. It's kind of
More
like,
that he looks older now than, yeah, okay.
You're watching. It's actually not in motion. It's just multiple pictures in 29 frames per second, which is the illusion of motion.
Yeah.
But the other side, and this is probably a very unpopular opinion, I would admit that, and I know a lot of Cobra Kai fans are listening to a podcast, you're a big fan, but in my opinion, I don't want Cobra Kai to go another like 6 seasons or whatever. And maybe I'm wrong in that. Maybe they could nail out another 6 seasons, or maybe they're can do 2 spin-offs or something. But I don't know. I Cobra Kai being good is enough of a miracle. I get too worried, and maybe I'm being too precious with it. But I think it'd be fine if, these characters that were young get to a point where they're older and they're no longer qualified for the under 18 karate tournament.
Maybe there's a different tournament for those over 18, and then, oh shit, these people actually know karate. They're not children.
maybe we bid a fond farewell to these characters. And again, that's probably blasphemous for me to say. This show should maybe go on for a million years. I don't know. I'm sure they could pull it off, but at least at this moment, I'm not interested in seeing a new crop of kids get into high school and then follow their path. Because again, I'm an older gentleman, so I've watched shows that then have a new class or a new generation. It's usually not as good. But then again, Cobra Kai is that, and it's great. So I could be wrong. It's just my initial thoughts are like, oh, I'm in now. I want to see how Hawk's adjusting. I want to see what's going on with the characters we know, which we kind of don't really see them at all in this episode, besides Daniel and Johnny, obviously, and a little bit of Tori and Amanda. But we kind of don't check in with any of the other students. You know what I mean? But again, I'm not saying I'm right. Those are just my initial thoughts. Like, okay, let's get back to Miguel and Hawk and even Sam or whatever.
Even Sam, Jim?
Yeah, even Sam. But anyways, the way this still plays out, this is still very Cobra Kai. It's keeping with kind of the mantra of the show. Like, again, people get caught up in things, they get bullied, they turn to some sort of salvation, and maybe that's entering the lion's den, because as we see, it's going to be leading him towards Cobra Kai. So like, the story is still cool. I'm just, I'm just bummed because I want to see the other characters.
Yeah, I get it. I do get it. And I agree about we don't need 100 seasons. I mean, I'm always going to be more of a proponent of more of a, I guess, kind of UK TV model where it's like, hey, here's the story we wanted to tell, and 2 seasons, and we're done. Even though I would have hated if this show ended after 2 seasons. So, it's like, it's hard. We're in 2 minds about it, right? Because we want more Cobra Kai, and we also don't want to dilute it. But this is the thing we always talk about towards the end of the season, and I'm sure we'll chat more about it. I have that feeling more when when it feels like they're setting up new things rather than building off what they already have. And this is that, like with Kenny, they're setting up new things in a way, but the way that his story intertwines with the existing characters, specifically Robbie, spoiler alert for later in the season, does make it still feel justified to have him come in at this point.
Agreed. But, it's a nice, the way it comes at the end, like, it did prove me wrong in a way, because I'm going through my initial thoughts watching the episode. I'm like, oh, okay, like, is this just going to be about Daniel again and how dealing with his son? But then when they bring in the connection to Robbie and Cobra Kai, I'm like, oh, okay, that's like a smart way that they did that.
Yeah, whereas I, at the end of the episode, was like, I get 8 more of these, ha ha ha, and I didn't watch them all in one go, so I didn't have that drain feeling, where every second was, like, precious. But either way, immediately after Kenny's introduction, which, he's playing his video game, doing his dance, Anthony is, making fun of him with his friends on the bus. Immediately after that, we have... like, as you said, there's 3 storylines in this episode, which is kind of, I mean, it makes sense. It's only 30 minutes, but it gives us quite a bit of time with at least 2 of them. So Daniel and Johnny, I do love Daniel showing up with his handstanders, and Johnny's just kind of there getting the work done properly and fucking finishing it off with a big machine like the way you should, and he's all annoyed. But this is basically just them going, okay, now our kids have banded together, basically, so I guess we have to too, and they agree to learn some of each other's techniques and whatever, and that is just what we've been wanting to see.
Well, yeah, I love, because we're playing off of, what we saw Johnny in season 1, episode 1. He was a handyman guy.
Yeah.
So the thing with Daniel is, he's got soft baby hands outside of karate, never worked an actual day in his life. I mean, outside of maybe selling bonsai trees and cars. But I love, because they hit on it here where Johnny brings in the sander, but then they touch on it again when he's doing paint the house, because he's like, this is not how you paint a house. You need this.
I love
that. Such great fun moments that are like, feel really real. And then just, like, the way they have their back and forth is awesome. I mean, they're the will they won't they of this show. And even the way Daniel convinces Johnny to like be a little bit more on board really works, where he kind of shows him the badass. He does the karate chop of the bottle like Miyagi did with the racist guys at the beach. And just bringing up the fact that Mr. Miyagi is a badass and tying it in with how he saved him from Kreese when Johnny was just a young kid who lost the All Valley, like all that stuff, like mwah, like that's that's why this show is as good as it is, because they're working with the real history of these characters and like blending it in a realistic way.
Absolutely. And Johnny opens a bottle and he doesn't do this thing. He
Yes,
just
he's
throws
still
it
not doing
again.
a thing because it's a new Johnny.
Yeah, but no, it's great though when he's like, "Oh, you can't just put paint on top of paint. Like the old paint's just gonna peel off." And I'm like, "This is a great point. This is how I would do it. I don't know anything. I would just put paint on top of paint. But I know people who paint houses, and I'm like, oh, they're stripping everything down, and that's like the biggest part of the work is actually clearing it. And then you can go over with a sprayer or whatever." and Daniel's like, "That's not the point." And it's like, yeah, but also the paint though. So that's great. But yeah, and also the fact that like, I mean, that's how Daniel was convinced by, in a sense, like it was never really like, wow, Mr. Miyagi, you can stand on one leg on a pole. Like it was like, you're fucking badass. You beat up my bullies and you chopped that bottle and everything. And I want to learn this shit. And so I guess maybe we should touch on the other storylines too, but I don't know. I just want to stick with this for a sec, where he's learning all this stuff, and it's really fun because we get to see the contrast. And I talked about this in my quick take, but like Daniel-san and Mr. Miyagi, they are polar opposites. Daniel was always a hothead. He was always better suited for Cobra Kai in a sense. So it's really fun later on when we see him do these Cobra Kai things, because he's already like, he's always 1 inch away from flipping out, anyway. And basically Mr. Miyagi just gave him the tools to handle that and to make him more fleshed out as a human being and like better at a lot of stuff, obviously. But in contrast to that, Johnny is like, it's so far away from what a Miyagi student should be, much like Daniel was at the start of the Karate Kid. So it's just an interesting contrast where he's like doing all these things and he's having to listen to Daniel like wax philosophical through the whole thing, but he's at least like doing it, there's some dedication there, and it's kind of like it doesn't, we're not sure if he's really taking it in or not, but I picked the clip for the intro, and I do love at the end when he's just like, "No, be there," just eating his pretzel. I think that's great, where at least some of it has like internalized. And yeah, I just love it.
It's great. I kind of wish there's a little like this was like brought out a little bit more into other episodes.
Yes,
I mean, I understand why not, but yeah, it's all great stuff. It's the stuff like, I mean, I said this during when we saw the trailer, and there were hints at it that like this is what we invest our time for. This is why we rewatch this show over and over again. We've been waiting for this, and seeing Johnny like doing the kata, like that's great. I want to see some more payoff with some of that stuff, because you're right, like they're opposites, but they've shown so much of how they're alike. And yes, Daniel's a hothead, but also Johnny's the like, the bully / manly guy that we know has this sweet, sensitive part of him that's inside.
Yeah.
And if like, again, it's what the show's all about, balance. And I'm sure this is the stuff we're going to explore as they start learning from each other's styles. They don't understand. They're going to be unstoppable. They're going to be an unstoppable force. They're going to take over the valley. It's a foregone conclusion.
Exactly, and nothing's ever going to get between them again. But
they're gonna get married, and they're gonna live happily ever after.
It is kind of the stuff of fan fiction, this episode with the two of them.
Yeah.
I'm like, fuck yeah, this is what we want. I mean, they even go on a date. They go to see a hockey game, and Johnny picks a fight on Daniel's behalf, and then kind of disappears, make sure they get in the fight. And like, in the first few episodes of Cobra Kai, like in the writers' room, they're definitely like, okay, so what's the big fight in episode 1 gonna be? What's the big fight in episode 2? Every episode doesn't need a big fight, but like the Robbie one is the one in episode 1, and I think it's badass, and it's like a good character kind of development thing.
Well.
And yeah, and shot well, and choreography is good this season as well, as you were saying. But like, just seeing Daniel strike first here when they start talking about his wife, I mean, how great is that? It's amazing. And then at the end, he's like still obviously circling. His training's coming out. But then Johnny Lawrence is there and is like, yeah, I did the Miyagi thing. So there you go. They're basically unstoppable at this point, and that's the final scene for them. So they're on a positive trajectory coming out of this episode.
It is funny too when Johnny has that comment like, "No, be there." You know, you say you love this guy, you couldn't even teach him English or whatever.
Yeah.
And Daniel's like, "Don't even go there with me right now, Johnny." But yeah, it's always been fun to see them finding common ground, and there's even though I feel like the show falls back into it, and it's like kind of they have to, but it still is reasonable when they have disagreements. But there's so much there for them to bond over, so it's always fun to see.
Yeah. And so I guess getting into the other storylines, there's Amanda and Tori, and as you've said, they do a better job of making Tori just overall more sympathetic and understandable and likable this season. I mean, I guess in large part because she had to fill a certain role in seasons 2 and 3. She starts the big fight in season 2 towards the end, which is obviously like this huge cataclysm that changed everything in the world of karate and the world of Cobra Kai. But then she kind of has to do the same thing in season 3. Just because she's still with Cobra Kai and like the story needs these things to happen. So she does a big home invasion and is like a huge part of that. And her rivalry with Sam just seems, because Sam's dealing with post-traumatic stress all of last season, more or less. So it's like hard to be on Tori's side when it comes to that. And she does basically the same thing at the end of the season. But here we get to see her actually trying to live her life. And where Amanda's coming from makes sense as well. She shows up to her place of work. She's tried to just come in and she just wants to tell Tori to back off. But what she actually wants to do is, as we saw in the first episode, she's feeling unsafe in her own home. She's just been at home watching Outlander, trying to get through it all. And like, she's still upset and angry all of the time. And she's not a karate student. She can't beat someone up and take out her aggression. So she basically goes there to tell her off and to try to face the problem head on and reclaim some of her sense of safety and confidence. And it kind of goes wrong because she accidentally gets Tori fired, and Tori has a great line where I saw the chef dip his balls in the miso soup, and that's great. So she's already more sympathetic, and then we can see that Amanda is not quite. This is not what she was looking for. She did not hope to do this, even though she doesn't know Tori's circumstances yet. Obviously, Kreese comes and dumps that on her later, but she's already like, "Oh, this went a little further than I hoped."
Yeah. I think I think this is a great use of Amanda, and like kind of hinting at like a Tori and Amanda, like, once she gets more of the full story and understands, she can have more sympathy for her, because in the previous episode she's talking like I was, or even maybe a lot of members of the audience is like, this girl's a monster, which she kind of was. They did make her like a little bit too over the top in season 3 as like crazy villain. We still did see that she has her reasons for it, but I mean, even Robbie has to be like, what was your plan? He was going to break into the house. But yeah, I think this is a smart way to kind of have these two characters interact a bit. And then again, some more like misunderstanding where she, accidentally gets her fired. That clearly wasn't what she came there for. And then like the one question I had kind of is that, because then if we follow this storyline, we see, Tori's learning defense from Robbie at Cobra Kai now, but she's still kind of wound up, and Kreese pulls her aside and finds out that she lost her job and it's tough because she's on probation. And Kreese just kind of says like setbacks open up new paths and, whatever his Kreese thing is. But what is Kreese's end game when he goes to Amanda? Like, is he just trying, like, he knows that she's a good person that would feel bad for her and he's like preying off of that? But like, I was kind of curious on other people's thoughts on what he was trying to do here when he's like has to relay the information that she doesn't have a mom or she has to take care of her mom and she has to work and take care of her brother or whatever. Like, because clearly Amanda's gonna feel bad, and I mean, we do see that she tries to like buy her groceries, and of course Tori's not the one to try to take charity, especially from a LaRusso. But like, is that what his plan was? Like, I really kind of don't follow his logic.
Jim, you're thinking too much into this. It's Honeycrisp season.
Yeah.
And that store just has the best produce in the valley, and Kreese cares deeply about that sort of thing. No, it's a fair question. I think he's just, I don't know. I didn't even question it because he always has a scene where he shows up
True.
and makes people feel weird, like basically putting his opponents off kilter in one way or another. So in this case, that was just my assumption, honestly, that it's less about actually, like, maybe I think he probably cares about Tori a little bit, because he's, kind of an outcast of society in many ways as well. And he sees the LaRussos with all of their privilege and is like, fuck these people. And even if it just means getting into Amanda's head, like she's the one who was, she was trying to get the restraining order against him, and he served her with the restraining order and all of this good stuff. So they obviously have this going on. They have a thing, and he will probably, like, honestly, they've put this thing in place, no fighting until the tournament, and so he's got to get his rocks off somehow, and he loves playing mind games. So that's really all I read into it. But honestly, like, yeah, it's probably some, I don't know, a bit more altruistic than usual coming from him, but with a side of, this will probably get in Amanda's head and make her all fucked up, and that'll probably make Daniel fucked up or whatever. He's playing the long game. He always is.
Yeah. I mean, at the very least, it's just twisting the knife, which is very in character for Kreese. So that does make sense. But he also is, I mean, maybe knowingly or unknowingly setting up kind of a bridge between Amanda and Tori. I mean, obviously it's at a rocky place here, but maybe there's potential. One, I guess, nitpick, and again, I'm going to say something kind of negative about the show, even though I've said so many positive things. I love this show. But one nitpick I kind of have with this show, especially in this episode, is it never looks like they're at a real location. Like, that restaurant does not look like a restaurant when, Tori's the waitress. And this grocery store does not look like a grocery store to me. Like, to me, it always looks like it's clearly just some set that they threw some decorations around. So I don't know. That I know it's being that's my smarmy comment and that's my nitpick of it. But when I'm watching this, I'm like, this just doesn't even look like a location at all. This is clearly a set.
Like, to me, I'm just like, I assume this is what the US is like, this is what America looks like, because it's because every Hollywood movie, everything is probably, like, I've seen more sets than I've seen real places in America, you understand? And like, in this big shop, I'm like, I know that shops in the US are huge, like, because everything's huge out there because they have all this space. Like, this is the European perspective. We have so little space. Everything's fucking tiny over here, man. So I'm just like, yeah, of course this is what things look like. But yeah, I think you have a point. I also think, like, everything is very, very, like, if you look at the colors of this show, it's very overly saturated. And
maybe that's
kind of I think it gives a kind of a cartoony vibe. But yeah, looking at the actual grocery store, I'm like, that does look like a fucking storage space that they've plopped some of this shit into. But I also think it's, maybe some of the I look past it because of the bright colors in a way, because I'm like, this is a cartoon I'm watching with humans in it.
I think that makes sense. And yeah, maybe that's because I couldn't really put my finger on what makes it look like off to me. Maybe it is the saturation, because it always looks like it's Johnny's apartment, but they wheeled in some shelves of food in the background.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a nitpick. It doesn't ruin the show, but it's like when you're rewatching it and you watch when I'm watching it more than I have like discussing things, like it kind of just stands out a little bit more. So yeah, I mean that's kind of like where that goes is, Amanda rightfully has some more sympathy for Tori. I mean, how could you not, even though she's someone who's terrorizing your daughter? And I mean, if Sam gets wind of this, oh my God. But, we do get to see that Tori shows up at the dealership, throws the groceries down because Amanda clearly like left some for her. And
There
takes
are
home.
some apples in there. It is Honeycrisp season.
Very true. They're delicious. And I mean, we have Anush is there, and he's like, I should never get involved in these karate rivalries, or do I need to start wearing, protective gear to work? I do like that we're not seeing a lot of the dealership. I welcome that. Thank God. Only a little bit. Just take a little bit of the dealership, not too much.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. So where do we leave them? I think it's basically she comes there, throws the groceries down, and
it's
is
like
like
she's
just,
gonna
yeah.
I'm gonna embarrass your daughter. Like that's I like at the tournament, I'm gonna, embarrass your daughter. Like it's on site at the tournament. Like it's not in like a terrible place, but it's kind of like, hey, fuck you, lady. I hate your daughter and I hate your family because I have nothing.
Yeah, and it's entirely like this relationship between them, which wasn't the thing ever before. We know it's not resolved because it just is speeding off in this direction where Amanda's going to feel worse about what she's done, and she has made things worse because Tori's like, thanks for lighting a fire under my ass, and like,
Yeah,
now but it's clear it's not completely resolved. So it's an interesting thing to start out here in episode 2.
yeah.
What about the fucking hockey place though? That looks pretty real. They play hockey, and
That's true. Yeah, that looked real. Well, because it
Yeah.
reminded me, because there's other like times where they've shot at different, or it's clear they're on like a location. But I mean, I don't know budget wise how that works. But yeah, that did. And also, I didn't notice it in the show, but on John Hurwitz's Twitter, he did have pictures of like the big three were some of the hockey players, like Hayden Schlossberg, John Hurwitz.
Oh, cool.
What's the other dude? Josh Heald. Like he had
Yeah.
pictures of them wearing jerseys, so I assume they were extras in that scene. I tried to look for him this time, but I couldn't quite. There's only a few shots of the players outside of the, the tough guys that they start a fight with.
That's great. I love that. So I guess that basically we've finished those 2 storylines, and there's only 3. So there's Kenny, and the way that develops is that I get what you're saying, because I'm less interested to talk about it. Like, I was on board watching it, but I'm also like, are we going to go through all the beats of this storyline now? We already know what happens because we've seen it before. I don't know why. I think I blame my COVID brain, but as I watched this for the first time, but I didn't get that it was Anthony on the other end of the video game. I just thought like, kid moves to a new town, makes a friend. Like, it's basically the start of the Karate Kid. We're seeing this again, but then twist, it's cyberbullying all along, and then he's brought out to to a park in cosplay, which is it's a big ask for I mean, he's dumb for agreeing to it, but also children are dumb, so I guess so like it adds
horny.
up.
He's a little horny middle schooler. He'll do anything.
That's right, and he looks great. I like this outfit. I like this character they've created from the video game, and yeah, obviously he's not a fighter. He's just like kind of trying to stand up to bullies without not really knowing how, and ends up running away, climbing over a fence in a very the Karate Kid kind of way,
Yes, for sure.
I feel like that's a recurring motif, and ends up hiding in a dumpster. I think maybe they should have had some sort of line about how like, whoa, he's fast or something, because that does come up later, that he's a good runner as he's running away from them. But yeah, basically everything's shit for him, and we've seen him talk to his dad on the phone, and his location is also like walking down a hallway and there's a map on the wall, and it's like, you get from this that his dad's in a different country, but we're not gonna like make it a set or anything. So that's another sort of location that's just like
he's in the grocery store they were just in.
Yeah, so he's off being in the military, and they mention something about his brother being, away. So he's the man of the house, and he goes to talk to his brother, who, I guess, medium reveal. It's not a big reveal, but it's a medium reveal that it's the guy that Robbie knows from his time in juvie, who tells him he knows a guy, and that who's going to be able to help him stand up for himself. And that is a
Yeah.
good
Sean.
setup to end this episode on. Yeah, Sean.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I agree. It's a nice reveal. And yeah, I kind of had a suspicion that maybe they were going to go with the catfish route. I didn't know for sure when they revealed that when he's playing the game. I guess the first hint should have been that they weren't on headsets. I mean, kids got to be on it. What kids are playing games with chat these days? Maybe they
where's
are.
Discord?
I don't know.
I don't
You're telling me Dungeon Lord Legacies doesn't have a chat or a Discord server that they're speaking to each other? Come on.
An excellent point.
I was trying to. I think my suspicion was off. I couldn't prove my hypothesis because I was like, does this video? The video game music sounded familiar, so I was trying to see if it was either from the Karate Kid video game or if it was like a version of the music redone. But I couldn't verify that, so I think I was wrong on that.
I thought it sounded familiar too, but I didn't know if it was. I'm just listening.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to pull it up, but it feels like that would be a cool thing if it was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is a motif based on something from the second Karate Kid film or something. Like that'd be cool, and it feels like something they would do. I don't know why it felt familiar, but honestly, maybe it's just like
because it's video game
the
music.
genre rather than anything, because it's kind of generic video game music as well.
And once again, a girl causes all the issues.
That's right.
At least in the Karate Kid universe, that's how it works. These heteronormative relationships. But I mean, yeah, that's kind of what you said. It's like we've seen similar things before. I mean, we saw it with Johnny, Daniel, and Allie, and then we saw it to an extent with Miguel, Robbie, and Sam, and now kind of Tori as well. And now we're seeing it with Kenny and Anthony and Leah. Anthony Lapuso, if I could be so bold. And yeah, I mean, like we already kind of mentioned that we get to see him do the face of like, oh no, because it's funny that he apparently orchestrates this whole ruse to join him in the game and pretend to be Leah, but then when his annoying curly-haired friend who I hate
yes, he's great at being the worst because he just looks like someone who would get the shit punched out of him, but somehow he's the bully, and that is kind of making it more realistic in a way.
which reminds me of like in the new Spider-Man movies, like Spider-Man Homecoming, how they have the Tony Revolori, who was in like the Grand Budapest Hotel, play the bully. But it's not like he's like a big jack dude. He's kind of like just a smarmy, like little loser.
Yeah.
But he's still Peter Parker's bully. But yeah, they kind of do that here. But Anthony is like confused when he's like, hey, tell him to dress up and meet us in the park. And he's like, huh? What? Why? It's like, oh, clearly we're going to make fun of him. But I also do like the small hint that like Anthony knows the game and he knows the characters. And like, what do you mean? How do you know all this? Oh, I don't know. Heard some nerds talking about it. Because we're all that nerd who's pretending to be cool.
Yeah, and because it's showing that him and Kenny have more in common than him and these fucking idiots, which is the same thing as Daniel and Johnny back in the day, and all of these rivalries. But yeah, it's
which like, because again, I mean, I guess they don't. It would be tough to do it this season, but it reminds me that like, oh yeah, in a weird way, I want to see the Miguel Robbie moments like that, where they're finding common ground. I mean, they could both find common grounds on Lost Fathers, apparently, I mean, I guess depending on how that plays out. But like, it reminds me that, like, because seeing it through this, rivalry that's building, it's like, oh yeah, because Miguel and Robbie have a thing, mostly because of Johnny and just kind of general circumstance, but I'm sure they have a lot of common ground that can be explored. So at least it reminds me of potential like that, even if I would just rather follow those characters and see some of that stuff play out.
Yeah, no, I get that. But we do leave it at an interesting place. We know he's gonna get locked into the Cobra Kai universe. Robbie's gonna get someone else to interact with that isn't Kreese. And yeah, I guess I said last time I think we'd get more into Terry Silver next episode, but like, yeah, it's a very concentrated episode in that there's only these three storylines. We don't see, like, we literally don't see any of the other, you know, the basic generation, the Miguels and the Robbies of the school. So it's like, you are literally right in that these characters, new characters, pushing out the old, like, they're not in this one at all. And it's kind of a concentrated episode, but at the same time, at the end of it, the hockey fight, everything with Daniel and Johnny, it gets me it got me incredibly pumped for the season and for what would come next. So hopefully that's how you all feel at home as well.
Well, also one other thing, and this is kind of like, we could talk about this for almost any episode, but it is funny to think that, like, we're still only like a year's past
I know.
from like the whole season, because we're, you know what, we're in, like, well, basically season 3 ended around like Christmas, so we're basically in January of 2019, I think, like, roughly is the time frame of the show, because we're on the path to the next tournament, which is in May. But it's just so funny to think about, like, all the shit that's gone down. And yeah, here we are. We're only like, what a crazy year in the Valley it's been.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's kind of funny with the age of the characters as well, which isn't like, it's not as egregious as you know, Daniel being 28 when he's participating in the under 18 karate tournament in the third Karate Kid. But it's still like getting there, and it's not helped by delays due to COVID and whatever. But it's very welcome news that they've filmed the next season. And I mean, if we don't have to wait a whole year, I'd be thrilled. That it would feel a bit like we'd already put in our waiting earlier. You know, we bought some time there where we waited so long for season 3 that maybe we'll get some of it back. But who knows? Either way, please do send us your thoughts. As we say all of the time, you can email us at showswhatyouknow@gmail.com. Let us know what you're thinking about this season. You can also tweet at us at showswhatyouknow. That's you, the letter U. And besides that, just check out the other shows on the network. We're talking about historical movies and TV on Real History. We're making up our own TV shows on Blank Meets Blank. And we've discussed every episode of The Sopranos on Cut to Black, A Sopranos Sit Down. Is there anything else, any final thoughts or stuff you want to bring up, Jim?
We're with the Vipers. Oh, the Vipers. And on that, well, Jesus. Yeah, there is one more thing.
Okay.
Strike first.
Strike hard. No mercy.